The silence inside Delta Flight 2847 was suffocating. Every passenger stared at seat 12C, where 17-year-old Naomi sat trembling, blood streaming from her nose and lip, staining her gray hoodie crimson. Standing over her was Bradford, a 45-year-old man in an expensive suit, his hands still clenched into fists, shaking with rage. Flight attendant Felicia stood frozen, phone in hand, unable to process what had just happened. Then the captain's voice crackled through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." Nobody moves. What happened in the 20 minutes before this moment would change everyone's life on this flight forever. But nobody could have guessed that the girl covered in blood held the most horrifying truth of all. Before we dive into this shocking story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from right now. And if you believe in standing up against injustice, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, because what happens next will leave you absolutely speechless. Trust me, you need to hear every single word of what's coming. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Naomi Walker had been awake since 4 in the morning, her stomach twisting with excitement and nerves. Today was supposed to be the best day of her life. After years of grinding through honors classes, staying up until midnight doing homework while her mama worked the night shift at the hospital, after winning every science fair in Atlanta and volunteering at the community clinic every weekend, she had finally done it. Northwestern University had offered her a full-ride scholarship to study biomedical engineering. She was going to be a doctor. She was going to make her mama proud. She was going to prove that kids from the South Side could do anything. The scholarship program required all incoming freshmen to attend an orientation weekend in Chicago, and Naomi had saved every penny from her part-time job at the library to buy this plane ticket. She couldn't afford to miss a single day of classes, so she had to fly alone. Her mama, Pearl, had hugged her so tight that morning at the airport that Naomi thought her ribs might crack. "Baby, you are the strongest person I know," Pearl had whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Don't let nobody make you feel like you don't belong up there. You earned this." Naomi had nodded, blinking back her own tears, and walked through security with her worn backpack and a heart full of dreams. Now, sitting in seat 12C, Naomi opened her biomedical engineering textbook, the pages already covered with sticky notes and highlighter marks. She had bought it used online and had been studying it for weeks, wanting to get ahead before classes even started. Around her, the plane filled with travelers. Business people in suits typed furiously on laptops. Families wrangled tired children. College students plugged in earbuds and closed their eyes. Naomi barely noticed any of them. She was too busy reading about cellular regeneration, imagining the day she would stand in a lab coat, finding cures, saving lives. Then Bradford Whitmore boarded the plane, and everything changed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal gray Armani suit that probably cost more than Pearl made in 3 months. His leather briefcase gleamed under the cabin lights, and his shoes were so polished Naomi could see her reflection in them as he passed. He walked with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no, never being questioned, never being anything other than the most important person in any room. When he checked his boarding pass and realized his seat was 12B, right next to Naomi, his face twisted into something ugly. Bradford looked at Naomi the way someone might look at garbage left on the sidewalk, his lip curling in disgust. He sighed loudly, making sure everyone around could hear his displeasure. "Of course," he muttered under his breath, but just loud enough for Naomi to hear. "Just my luck." Naomi felt her face grow hot, but she kept her eyes on her textbook, pretending she hadn't heard. She had heard comments like that before. She knew how to make herself small, how to not take up too much space, how to survive in rooms where people didn't want her. Bradford shoved his briefcase into the overhead compartment with more force than necessary, then glanced at Naomi's backpack, which sat neatly in its designated spot. "Your bag is taking up too much space," he said sharply. "Move it." Naomi looked up, confused. Her backpack was small, fitting easily in the allotted area without touching any other luggage. "I'm sorry, sir, but I think it's fine where it is," she said softly, hating how her voice shook. Bradford's eyes narrowed. "Did I ask what you think? Move it. Now." Before Naomi could respond, Flight Attendant Felicia Martin appeared, her uniform crisp and professional, her smile practiced but genuine. Felicia was 30 years old and had been working for Delta for 7 years. She loved her job most days, but she had learned to recognize certain types of passengers immediately. The entitled ones, the ones who thought the world existed to serve them. She had seen Bradford's type 1,000 times. "Is there a problem here, sir?" she asked, her tone pleasant but firm. Bradford turned to Felicia, his expression shifting to one of exaggerated patience, as if he were dealing with a particularly slow child. "Yes, there's a problem. This girl's bag is blocking the entire overhead compartment. It's a safety hazard." Felicia glanced up at Naomi's backpack, then back at Bradford. "Sir, I can see the bag is well within the size requirements and properly stored. Is there something else I can help you with?" Bradford's jaw tightened. "Of course, you'd take her side," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. Figures. The older white woman sitting in seat 12A by the window, a woman named Geneva Pritchard, leaned forward with interest. Geneva was 65 years old, retired, and spent most of her time on cruise ships and flights between her children's houses. She had opinions about everything and everyone, and she was not shy about sharing them. "Kids these days don't respect anyone," she said to Bradford, loud enough for Naomi to hear. "No manners at all." Bradford nodded in agreement, settling into his seat with a smug expression. "You're absolutely right, Mom. No respect." Naomi felt her face burning. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to teleport off this plane and never come back. But she couldn't. She had worked too hard for this opportunity. She had to endure 2 hours on this flight, and then she would be free. She could do this. She had survived worse. She thought about her mama, working 3 jobs. She thought about her little brother and sister counting on her to show them that they could make it out too. She took a deep breath, opened her textbook again, and tried to focus on the words in front of her. As the plane began to taxi down the runway, Bradford deliberately stretched out, his elbow pressing hard against the shared armrest, claiming every inch of it for himself. Naomi shifted closer to the middle, making herself as small as possible. She could feel his hostility radiating off him like heat from a furnace. She knew this was going to be a long flight, but she had no idea just how much longer, how much worse, it was about to become. The engines roared to life, and the plane lifted into the sky, carrying with it a storm that was about to break. 45 minutes into the flight, the cabin had settled into a steady hum of white noise. The plane cut through the clouds, and most passengers had dozed off or buried themselves in books and screens. Naomi was trying desperately to focus on her textbook, but Bradford's presence next to her was like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. Every few minutes, he would shift aggressively, his elbow jabbing into her side. He spread his legs wide, invading her already limited space. He sighed loudly, over and over, as if her mere existence was an unbearable inconvenience. Then Felicia came down the aisle with the beverage cart, her smile tired but professional. "What can I get for you?" she asked Naomi first. "Just orange juice, please," Naomi said quietly. Felicia poured the juice into a plastic cup and handed it to her carefully. Bradford ordered scotch on the rocks, his voice cold and clipped. Make it a double. Felicia nodded, preparing his drink with practiced efficiency. She had dealt with men like Bradford before. Men who drank to dull whatever anger lived inside them. Men who took that anger out on anyone they perceived as weaker. As Felicia handed Naomi her orange juice, the plane hit a patch of mild turbulence. The cup tilted in Naomi's hand, and before she could catch it, orange juice splashed across the armrest and onto Bradford's sleeve. Naomi gasped, her eyes wide with horror. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." The plane just Bradford exploded out of his seat like a rocket, his face turning purple with rage. "Look what you've done!" he roared, shaking his arm as if the liquid were acid. "You stupid, careless." Naomi scrambled to grab napkins from the seat pocket, her hands shaking violently. "I'm so sorry, sir. It was an accident. Please." Bradford slapped the napkins out of her hand, sending them scattering across the floor. "Accident? You people never take responsibility for anything." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Several passengers turned to stare. Felicia immediately stepped between them, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine concern. "Sir, I need you to calm down right now. It was turbulence. Nobody is at fault here." Bradford whirled on Felicia, his eyes blazing. "Don't touch me with your dirty hands," he snarled, jerking away as she reached out with a towel. "And don't tell me to calm down. I have every right to be angry. This girl ruined a $500 shirt." Geneva leaned forward again, nodding vigorously. "He has every right to be upset. That girl should pay for dry cleaning." A deep voice cut through the tension. "Sir, it was turbulence. Calm down." Deep voice. Everyone turned to see Darren Thompson, a 35-year-old software engineer from Atlanta, standing in the aisle behind Bradford's row. Darren was 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a calm, steady presence. He had been watching the interaction with growing unease, and he couldn't stay silent anymore. Bradford turned his fury on Darren. "Nobody asked you," he spat. "Mind your business." Darren didn't back down. "A child just apologized for something that wasn't her fault. You're a grown man acting like a toddler. That is my business." Bradford's hands clenched into fists. "You want to make this your business? Go ahead. Let's see how that works out for you." Felicia raised her voice, trying to regain control. "Gentlemen, please. I need everyone to sit down right now." Kelsey Morris, a 28-year-old graphic designer, sitting in 11B, pulled out her earbuds and turned around. "Dude, that's really uncool." She apologized. "Let it go." Bradford laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Stay out of this, sweetheart. This doesn't concern you." Miguel Hernandez, a 42-year-old contractor in seat 14C, looked up from his magazine. "Show some respect, man. You're scaring the kid." Bradford spread his arms wide, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, great. Now the whole zoo is talking. What's next?" Naomi felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she bit down hard on her lip, refusing to let them fall. She would not cry. She would not give him the satisfaction. But her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and her breath came in short, shallow gasps. Felicia knelt down beside her, her voice gentle. "Honey, are you okay?" Naomi nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Felicia turned back to Bradford, her patience finally wearing thin. "Sir, I need you to lower your voice immediately, or I will have to report this incident to the captain." Bradford smirked. "Report me? Go ahead. I have lawyers. Do you have any idea who I am? I'm a platinum member of this airline. I fly 50,000 miles a year. You think they're going to care about some complaint from a flight attendant and a welfare kid?" The words hit Naomi like a physical blow. Welfare kid. She had heard variations of that insult her entire life. People looked at her second-hand clothes, her worn shoes, her old backpack, and they made assumptions. They didn't see the straight-A student. They didn't see the girl who tutored other kids for free every Thursday. They didn't see the daughter who helped her mama pay bills by working 20 hours a week at the library. They just saw a poor black girl, and in their minds, that meant she was worth less. Naomi's hands were still shaking as she tried to collect the napkins from the floor. She needed to do something, anything, to make this situation better. She picked up her own napkins from her seat pocket and held them out to Bradford with trembling fingers. "Please, sir, take these. I really didn't mean to spill anything. I'm so sorry." Bradford looked down at the napkins in her outstretched hand, like they were covered in filth. Then, with deliberate cruelty, he knocked them out of her hand, sending them flying across the aisle. "I don't want your filthy tissues," he shouted. "Keep your hands to yourself." Geneva clucked her tongue disapprovingly. "You really should teach your children better manners," she said, looking at Naomi as if she were addressing her directly. Naomi's voice came out small and broken. "She's not my mother. I'm traveling alone." Bradford's eyes lit up with a cruel gleam. "Alone? Of course. No supervision. Typical. Let me guess. Your mom's too busy to take care of you? Or maybe she just doesn't care." That was the breaking point for Darren. He stood up fully, his voice hard as steel. "That's enough, man. She's a kid. Leave her alone." Felicia positioned herself between them again, her voice rising. "Gentlemen, I'm serious. Sit down now, or I will call the captain." Bradford finally sat, but his eyes never left Naomi. The hatred in his gaze was palpable, a living thing that seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the air. He settled into his seat with deliberate slowness, then stretched his legs out into the aisle, blocking Naomi's path completely. She was trapped, physically, emotionally, completely trapped. And deep down, in the part of her that had learned to sense danger long before it arrived, Naomi knew that this was far from over. The plane continued to fly through the peaceful sky, but inside that metal tube, a storm was building. Passengers tried to go back to their books, their movies, their sleep, but the tension remained, thick and suffocating. Nobody wanted to look at Naomi directly, but everyone was aware of her. The girl in seat 12C. The girl who had spilled juice on the wrong man. The girl who, in the next 30 minutes, would become the center of something none of them would ever forget. 30 minutes passed in agonizing silence. Naomi sat rigid in her seat, her textbook open but unread. Her eyes tracked the same sentence over and over, the words blurring together into meaningless shapes. Next to her, Bradford scrolled through his phone, occasionally letting out contemptuous snorts as he read something. Geneva, by the window, dozed lightly, her head tilted back, mouth slightly open. The cabin was quiet except for the steady drone of the engines and the occasional cough or rustle of movement from other passengers. But underneath that surface calm, Naomi could feel Bradford's anger simmering, waiting for an excuse to explode again. She needed to use the restroom. She had been holding it for the past 20 minutes, too afraid to ask Bradford to move, too afraid to disturb the fragile peace that had settled over their row. But her bladder was aching now, and she couldn't wait any longer. She took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage she had, and turned slightly toward Bradford. "Excuse me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Bradford didn't respond. He continued scrolling through his phone as if she didn't exist. Naomi tried again, a little louder this time. "Excuse me, sir. I need to use the restroom." Bradford slowly turned his head toward her, his eyes cold and empty. "What?" he asked, drawing out the word as if speaking to her was the most tedious thing he had ever done. Naomi swallowed hard. "I need to get past you. To use the restroom." Bradford looked her up and down with undisguised disgust. "Hold it," he said flatly, turning back to his phone. Naomi felt her face flush with humiliation. "Sir, I really need to go. Please." Bradford sighed dramatically, as if she were asking him to climb Mount Everest. "You really can't control yourself, can you?" He made a show of slowly, deliberately moving his legs to the side, taking as much time as possible. Naomi stood up quickly, squeezing past him with her body pressed against the back of the seat in front of her, trying not to touch him at all. But as she stepped into the aisle, Bradford suddenly stretched his leg out, and Naomi's foot caught on his shin. She stumbled forward, barely catching herself on the armrest of the row ahead. Kelsey gasped. "Oh my God! Are you okay?" Naomi's face burned with shame as she straightened up. "I'm fine. I'm sorry." Darren's voice came from behind, sharp with anger. "Did you just trip her?" Bradford looked up with exaggerated innocence. "Trip her? I didn't do anything. She's clumsy. Not my fault." Naomi didn't wait to hear more. She hurried down the aisle toward the bathroom, her vision blurring with unshed tears. She locked herself in the tiny lavatory and leaned against the door, her whole body shaking. In the harsh fluorescent light, she looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were red and puffy. Her hands trembled as she turned on the faucet and splashed cold water on her face. She pulled out her phone, desperate to call her mama, to hear Pearl's voice telling her everything would be okay. But there was no signal at 30,000 feet. She was completely alone. Naomi remembered what her mama had said to her that morning, after they hugged goodbye at the airport. "Baby, the world won't always be kind to you. People are going to judge you, try to make you feel small, try to tell you that you don't deserve the things you've earned. But you are strong, you are brilliant, you are worthy. Don't ever let anyone make you forget that." Naomi took a deep breath, wiping away the tears that had finally escaped. She could do this. Just one more hour. Then she would never have to see Bradford again. She unlocked the door and stepped back into the aisle. Geneva was standing there, waiting for the restroom, her arms crossed impatiently. "Took you long enough," she muttered. Naomi mumbled an apology and hurried past her, back toward her seat. But when she reached row 12, her heart dropped into her stomach. Her backpack, which she had carefully zipped and secured before boarding, was now open. Her belongings were scattered across her seat. Her textbook lay face down on the floor. Her notebook was open, her private notes exposed. Her wallet had been opened, and the photo of her mama and her little brother and sister, her most precious possession, was bent and creased. Naomi stared at the mess in disbelief. "What happened?" she asked, her voice shaking. Bradford didn't even look up from his phone. "It fell. You didn't close it properly." Naomi knew that was a lie. She always zipped her backpack completely. She was obsessive about it because she couldn't afford to lose anything. "Someone went through my bag," she said quietly, looking around at the nearby passengers. Bradford finally looked at her, his expression bored. "Paranoid much? Nobody wants your stuff, trust me." Darren leaned forward from his seat. "This is messed up. Did anyone see what happened while she was gone?" Miguel shook his head apologetically. "I was asleep. Sorry." Kelsey turned around, her face troubled. "I had my headphones on, but yeah, this doesn't look like an accident." Naomi knelt down and began carefully picking up her things, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grasp them. The photo of her family had a crease right down the middle now, splitting her mama's face. Naomi felt something inside her crack. This wasn't just about a plane ride anymore. This was about dignity, about being treated like a human being. Felicia appeared at the end of the aisle, noticed the commotion, and came over quickly. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, her eyes moving between Naomi's tear-streaked face and the scattered belongings. Naomi wanted to scream. She wanted to accuse Bradford, to demand that the crew do something, to make him pay for the way he was treating her. But she was 17 years old and alone on a plane full of strangers, and he was a rich white man with lawyers and platinum status. She knew how this story ended. "It's okay," she whispered to Felicia. "I'm fine. Just clumsy." Felicia's eyes said she didn't believe that for a second. But what could she do? She had already warned Bradford once. If she pushed harder without concrete proof, she might get in trouble herself. "If you need anything at all, you press that call button." "Okay," she said gently, placing a hand briefly on Naomi's shoulder. Naomi nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She gathered her things, carefully placed them back in her backpack, and sat down, clutching the bag to her chest like a shield. Bradford settled back into his seat, a small, satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Naomi realized something in that moment, something that made her blood run cold. He was enjoying this. This wasn't just about an accidental spill anymore. This wasn't even about racism in some abstract, impersonal way. Bradford was actively taking pleasure in her pain. He had gone through her things deliberately, looking for ways to hurt her, to violate her sense of safety and privacy. And he knew he could get away with it. The plane continued flying smoothly through the clear afternoon sky. But inside Naomi's chest, everything was falling apart. 20 minutes crawled by. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the flight attendants prepared for the approach phase. Passengers around them tried to maintain normalcy, but everyone in rows 11 through 15 was hyper-aware of the tension radiating from row 12. Then Bradford's phone rang. Despite the policy requiring phones to be on silent mode, he answered it, speaking at full volume. "Yeah, Mark. I'm on the plane now. Terrible service. The people here, you can imagine." He laughed, the sound grating and cruel. Bradford glanced sideways at Naomi as he continued. "I'm stuck in coach because someone messed up my booking. And the diversity hires everywhere, Mark, I'm telling you. Standards are dropping fast." Naomi kept her eyes fixed on her textbook, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. Bradford's voice grew louder, more performative. "Yeah, there's this girl next to me, scholarship kid. Obviously affirmative action. You know how it is. They don't earn it anymore. They just get handed everything." Kelsey whipped around in her seat. "Can you please keep it down? People are trying to rest." Bradford smirked at her. "Freedom of speech, honey. Don't like it? Get better headphones." Miguel closed his magazine with a sharp snap. "There's a difference between free speech and being a jerk, man." Bradford's smile widened. "Oh, I'm sorry. Am I offending you? Let me guess. You're going to lecture me about sensitivity, too." Geneva stirred from her doze, blinking in confusion. "What's all the noise about?" she asked. Darren stood up, his patience finally exhausted. He stepped into the aisle and walked up to Bradford's row. "You need to stop. Right now." Bradford looked up at him, his expression shifting from amusement to challenge. "Or what? What are you going to do about it?" The two men stared at each other, the air between them crackling with potential violence. Felicia rushed over from the front galley, her face pale. "Gentlemen, sit down immediately, or I will call the captain." Bradford held Darren's gaze for another long moment, then slowly, deliberately sat down. "Whatever you say," he muttered, but his eyes promised that this wasn't over. Darren returned to his seat, his hands shaking with suppressed anger. Naomi could feel every eye in the section on her now. She was the center of this storm, the reason for all this conflict, and she hated it. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to sink through the floor of the plane and never be seen again. Then something inside her snapped. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the culmination of 17 years of being treated like she was less than human. Maybe it was the thought of her mama working 3 jobs while people like Bradford called her a welfare kid. Whatever it was, Naomi found herself speaking before she could stop herself. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice quiet but clear. Bradford turned to her, eyebrows raised in mock surprise. "Excuse me." Naomi's hands were shaking, but she forced herself to look directly at him. "Why are you doing this to me? I didn't do anything to you. I apologized for the drink. I've been quiet. I've tried to stay out of your way. So why do you hate me so much?" Bradford leaned toward her, his voice low and venomous. "You want to know why? Because you exist. That's enough." Naomi felt tears prickling at her eyes again. But this time she didn't fight them. "I worked hard for my scholarship. I earned it. I have a 4.0 GPA. I volunteer at a hospital. I tutor kids for free. I earned my place at Northwestern." Bradford laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Earned? Please. You got it because of your skin color. They need to fill quotas, make themselves look diverse. You're a box they checked, nothing more." Naomi's voice rose despite her efforts to control it. "You don't know me. You don't know anything about my life, about what I've been through, about how hard I've worked." Bradford's face twisted with contempt. "I know enough. I know your type. The type that takes what doesn't belong to them. The type that demands handouts and calls it justice." Naomi felt something break open inside her chest. "My type? What type is that, sir? Please, tell me. What type am I?" Bradford leaned even closer, so close she could smell the scotch on his breath. "The type that ruins everything. The type that brings down standards. The type that doesn't belong in places like Northwestern. On planes like this. In spaces built by people like me." The tears were flowing freely now, streaming down Naomi's cheeks. But her voice grew stronger, not weaker. "I belong here. I have every right to be on this plane. I paid for my ticket. I'm going to a university that chose me." Bradford stood up abruptly, towering over her. "Rights? You people always talk about rights. Let me tell you something about rights, little girl." Geneva nodded vigorously. "She is making quite a scene." Kelsey spun around, her voice sharp. "She's defending herself." Miguel stood up too. "This has gone too far, man. Way too far." "But have you ever been in a situation where someone targeted you just because of how you looked? Have you ever had to defend your right to exist in a space?" Comment number 1 if you've ever felt like Naomi right now, trapped and powerless. And hit that like button if you believe she has every right to stand up for herself. Subscribe because what happens in the next 60 seconds will shock you to your core. The question is, what would you do if you were Naomi? Would you fight back? Would you stay silent? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Now, back to the moment where everything explodes. Bradford stood towering over Naomi, his face contorted with rage. "You want rights," he hissed. "Go back to where you came from." Naomi stood up too, though her legs were shaking so badly she wasn't sure they would hold her. She looked up at Bradford, tears streaming down her face, but her voice steady. "This is where I come from. I'm American. I was born in Atlanta. My grandmother was born in Georgia. My great-grandmother was born in Alabama. How far back do I have to go before you believe I belong here?" Bradford's hand twitched. "American." He laughed, the sound hollow and hateful. "Don't make me laugh. You're not American. You're..." Before he could finish the sentence, he shoved Naomi hard, his hand slamming into her shoulder. Naomi stumbled backward, her hip hitting the armrest hard enough to make her gasp in pain. She fell into her seat, the breath knocked out of her. Darren lunged forward. "Hey!" Felicia screamed. "Sir, stop right now." But Bradford wasn't done. He pointed a shaking finger directly in Naomi's face. "You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. You think a piece of paper from some university is going to change that? You think people like you can ever be anything more than..." Naomi cut him off. She didn't know where the strength came from. Maybe from her mama. Maybe from every ancestor who had fought and survived and refused to be broken. "I'm going to be a doctor," she said, her voice ringing through the cabin. "I'm going to save lives. I'm going to help people. What are you going to be?" The question hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Bradford's face went from red to purple. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You little." And then he swung. His fist came up fast, faster than anyone could react, and connected with Naomi's face with a sickening crack. The sound of Bradford's fist hitting Naomi's face echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. Time seemed to slow down. Naomi's head snapped back from the force of the blow, and she fell sideways, her temple slamming against the window. Blood exploded from her lip, bright red against her dark skin, splattering across her gray hoodie. The cabin erupted in chaos. Kelsey screamed. Miguel shouted. Geneva shrieked something incoherent. But Bradford wasn't done. Something had broken inside him, some final restraint snapping like a rotten rope. He grabbed a fistful of Naomi's hair and yanked her upright. Naomi's scream of pain and terror cut through every other sound. "Stop, please," she sobbed, her hands flying up to her head, trying to pry his fingers loose. But Bradford's grip was iron. He pulled her face toward his and hit her again, this time in the nose. The cartilage crunched under his knuckles. Blood poured from her nostrils, running down her face, dripping onto the seat, onto his hands, onto everything. Darren launched himself out of his seat and grabbed Bradford's shoulder, trying to pull him away. "Get off her!" he roared. Bradford swung wildly with his free hand, catching Darren in the stomach. Darren doubled over, gasping for air, and fell into the aisle. Miguel vaulted over his seat, his magazine forgotten, and threw his arms around Bradford's torso from behind. "Someone help me!" Miguel shouted. Bradford thrashed like a wild animal, his elbow connecting with Miguel's jaw. Miguel grunted in pain but held on. Felicia hit the emergency button behind the front galley, her hands shaking so badly she almost missed it. She grabbed the intercom. "We need help in the cabin immediately. Passenger assault in progress. Repeat, passenger assault." Sterling Hayes, a 35-year-old flight attendant, working the first-class cabin, came running. He was a former college linebacker, broad and strong, and when he saw what was happening, his training kicked in immediately. He wrapped his arms around Bradford from the front, pinning his arms to his sides. "Sir, you need to stop right now," Sterling commanded, his voice booming through the cabin. Bradford jerked his head forward, his forehead connecting with Sterling's cheek. Sterling's head snapped back, but he didn't let go. Miguel and Sterling together finally managed to wrestle Bradford away from Naomi. Bradford stumbled backward into the aisle, breathing hard, his shirt untucked, his expensive suit jacket torn. Blood, Naomi's blood, covered his hands and smeared across his white shirt. "She provoked me," Bradford screamed, his voice raw. "All of you saw it. She attacked me first." Geneva, her face pale and shocked, grabbed the back of her seat. "Someone call the police," she shrieked. Kelsey, tears streaming down her face, held up her phone. "I'm recording this. I have everything on video." Naomi lay crumpled in her seat, her hands pressed to her face, blood seeping between her fingers. Her sobs were high and broken, the sound of someone whose world had just shattered. Darren crawled to her side, ignoring his own pain. "It's okay. You're safe now. You're going to be okay," he kept repeating, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. Felicia knelt beside Naomi with a first aid kit, her professional training warring with her horror at what she had just witnessed. "Honey, let me see. Let me help you," she said gently, her own voice shaking. Naomi slowly lowered her hands, Her face was a mess of blood and tears. Her nose was clearly broken, already swelling, blood still flowing steadily. Her bottom lip was split open, and a bruise was forming on her temple where her head had hit the window. She looked up at Felicia, with eyes that held more pain than any 17-year-old should ever know. "Am I going to be okay?" she whispered. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but authoritative. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Hector Ramirez speaking. We are aware of the situation in the cabin. Medical personnel are on standby at Indianapolis International Airport, where we will be making an emergency landing in approximately 12 minutes. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants, secure the cabin." The announcement sent a ripple of reaction through the passengers. Some craned their necks to see what had happened. Others pulled out phones to text loved ones. A few prayed quietly. Sterling and Miguel had Bradford pinned against the back of a seat now. Sterling pulled out a set of flex cuffs, the kind airlines carried for exactly this kind of emergency, and secured Bradford's wrists behind his back. Bradford was still shouting, "You can't do this! I'm a victim here. She attacked me. I was defending myself. This is assault. I'll sue every single one of you." Miguel's voice was ice cold. "A victim? You just beat a child." Bradford's eyes darted around wildly, looking for someone, anyone, who might support him. "Someone film this," he demanded. "They're restraining me illegally. This is police brutality." Kelsey held up her phone, her hand surprisingly steady despite the tears on her face. "Oh, I'm filming all right, every second. For evidence." Bradford's face twisted with fury. "I have rights. I'm an American citizen. You can't treat me like this." Geneva, who had been silent since Bradford's attack began, finally spoke, her voice trembling. "He does have a legal right to defend himself, if he was threatened." Darren, still kneeling next to Naomi, turned to glare at Geneva with such intensity that she shrank back. "Lady, please be quiet." Felicia pressed clean gauze to Naomi's nose, trying to stem the bleeding. "We're landing soon, sweetheart. Just hold on. You're so brave. You're doing so well." But Naomi wasn't doing well. She was shaking violently, her body in shock. Blood soaked through the gauze as fast as Felicia could replace it. Her nose throbbed with every heartbeat. Her lip burned, her head pounded. But worse than any physical pain was the emotional devastation. She had been beaten. Publicly, brutally beaten. And part of her, the part that had internalized every racist message she had ever received, whispered that maybe it was somehow her fault. The plane began its descent, the engines changing pitch. Through the windows, the flat farmlands of Indiana came into view. The cabin was heavy with the smell of blood and fear and sweat. Bradford stood restrained in the aisle, still muttering about his rights, about his lawyers, about how everyone would pay for this. And Naomi, the girl who had just wanted to go to college, sat covered in her own blood, learning in the cruelest way possible that sometimes the world was exactly as brutal as her mama had warned her it would be. The plane descended rapidly, the change in altitude making ears pop throughout the cabin. Captain Hector Ramirez emerged from the cockpit, leaving his co-pilot Reed Fletcher at the controls. Hector was 50 years old, a veteran pilot with 25 years of experience and a father of 3 daughters. The moment Felicia's emergency call had come through, his blood had run cold. He had dealt with unruly passengers before, even a few fights, but an adult assaulting a minor was something else entirely. As he walked down the aisle, his face was set in grim determination. He took in the scene with a practiced eye. Bradford, restrained and still shouting. Miguel and Sterling holding him in place. Naomi, covered in blood, shaking like a leaf. Darren kneeling beside her. Felicia applying pressure to her wounds. The other passengers, some filming, some looking away, all traumatized. "What happened here?" he asked, though he had already received a brief report through the intercom. Felicia looked up, her face streaked with tears. She hadn't realized she was crying. "Captain, this man attacked this passenger. Unprovoked assault. Multiple strikes to her face." Hector moved to Naomi's side and crouched down to her level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Naomi's voice was barely a whisper. "Naomi." Hector's heart broke at the fear in her eyes. "Naomi, you're going to be okay. We're landing in Indianapolis in just a few minutes. There are paramedics waiting, and police too. You're safe now." Naomi nodded weakly, but her eyes said she didn't feel safe at all. How could she ever feel safe again? Bradford's voice rose above the cabin noise. "Captain, listen to me. You need to hear my side. This girl attacked me first. She's been harassing me since we boarded. Everyone here is lying to protect her." Hector stood and turned to face Bradford, his expression carved from stone. "Sir, I need you to remain silent." Bradford's eyes widened with outrage. "Silent? I'm the victim here. I demand you listen to my side of the story." Hector took a step closer to Bradford. "Sir, I watched the footage from our cabin security camera." The color drained from Bradford's face. "Camera? What camera?" Hector gestured toward the small, discreet dome cameras installed in the cabin ceiling. "We have security cameras throughout the aircraft, sir. It's company policy. And I saw everything." Bradford's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. That's an invasion of privacy. That's illegal surveillance." Hector's voice remained calm, professional, devastating. "No, sir. It's a standard security measure. All passengers are informed of its presence in the terms and conditions they agree to when purchasing a ticket. And you, sir, are in very serious trouble." Kelsey pushed her way forward, her phone still in her hand. "Captain, I have video too. From my phone. Everything." Hector nodded. "Please send that to our airline security team immediately. It will be crucial evidence." Kelsey's fingers flew over her phone screen. Already on it. Miguel, still helping to restrain Bradford, spoke up. "Captain, I saw the whole thing too. Has been harassing her since takeoff. Making racist comments. Threatening her." Darren stood up from where he had been comforting Naomi. He went through her personal belongings when she went to the bathroom. "I saw him leaning over her seat, going through her backpack." Hector's expression darkened further. "Is this true?" he asked Naomi. She nodded, her voice still weak. "Yes, sir. When I came back from the restroom, my things were everywhere. My wallet was open. The picture of my family was damaged." Hector turned back to Bradford. "That's theft and invasion of privacy in addition to assault. These are all federal offenses when committed aboard an aircraft." Bradford thrashed against his restraints. "You have no proof. Shay's lying. They're all lying." Felicia stepped forward. "Sir, we can review the cabin footage for the entire flight. Every interaction is recorded." Bradford went very still. Then, suddenly, something fell from his jacket pocket, knocked loose during the struggle. His phone clattered to the floor, the screen still lit up. Kelsey, who was closest, bent down and picked it up. Her eyes widened as she looked at the screen. "Captain, you need to see this. Right now." Hector took the phone from Kelsey and looked at the display. What he saw made his jaw clench. On the screen was a group chat conversation. Bradford had taken a photo of Naomi when she wasn't looking and sent it to his friends with the caption, "Look at this welfare queen sitting next to me. Ruining my flight." Below it, a string of laughing emojis and offensive comments from his contacts. "Can't believe they let them fly." One said, "Send her to the back of the bus," said another. The comments went on, each one worse than the last. Hector looked up from the phone, his face a mask of controlled fury. This is evidence of premeditated harassment. Bradford's voice went shrill. That's my private property. You can't look at that. That's a violation of my constitutional rights. Hector's voice was quiet, but deadly. This phone fell in the commission of a federal crime. It's evidence, and these messages show clear intent to harass and demean another passenger based on race. He handed the phone to Sterling. Secure this as evidence for law enforcement. But the revelations weren't over. A woman from row 15 stood up, her voice shaking but determined. Her name was Brooke Patterson, a 38-year-old accountant from Chicago. Captain, I need to say something. Hector turned to her. Yes, ma'am. Brooke took a deep breath. That man said something to me when we were boarding. When I was putting my carry-on in the overhead bin, he said, "Guess they let anyone fly these days." Bradford shook his head violently. I never said that. She's making it up. But Brooke continued, emboldened by Naomi's courage. Yes, you did. And you bumped into me deliberately when I tried to get to my seat. A young man named Jared Williams, 22 years old, stood up from seat 18C. He did it to me too. In the boarding tunnel, he knocked my bag out of my hand, then told me to watch where I was going, boy. The word hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. Hector looked around the cabin. Anyone else? An older white man named Lester Murphy, 60 years old, raised his hand from seat 16A. I heard him on his phone earlier in the flight. Before all this started, he used the N-word multiple times. A ripple went through the cabin. Several other passengers nodded, confirming they had heard it too. Bradford's face went from pale to bright red. This is a conspiracy. You're all ganging up on me. This is reverse racism. Geneva, who had been silent through these revelations, spoke up, her voice uncertain. But he's a successful businessman. Surely he wouldn't. Kelsey spun on her. Success doesn't give you the right to be a monster. The truth was becoming impossible to deny. This wasn't a one-time incident. This wasn't a man who had lost his temper in an isolated moment. Bradford Whitmore was a serial harasser who had been doing this for a long time, targeting black passengers, making their flights miserable, and getting away with it because of his status as a platinum member. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Felicia, who had been listening to all of this while tending to Naomi, looked up at Captain Ramirez with an expression of someone wrestling with a difficult decision. Captain, I need to tell you something. Hector looked at her. What is it? Felicia took a deep breath. I've seen this man before. On another flight. About 6 months ago. He did the same thing to a young black woman named Tamara. She filed a complaint. The cabin went silent. Hector's voice was very quiet. And what happened to that complaint? Felicia's eyes filled with tears. Nothing. Hess a platinum member. Big spender. The airline's corporate office swept it under the rug. They gave him a token apology letter, and that was it. The woman, Tamara, she wrote back, saying she didn't feel safe flying with us anymore. We lost her as a customer. But we kept him. Hector's face went pale. You're saying, this is a pattern? That he's done this before and the airline protected him? Felicia nodded miserably. Yes, sir. I filed the report myself. I can give you the incident number right now. It's in the system. Bradford was shouting again, his voice cracking. She's lying. This is a fabrication. I've never seen that woman before in my life. Sterling, still holding Bradford's restraints, spoke quietly. Actually, sir, I remember that flight too. I was working it. Felicia's telling the truth. The weight of this revelation settled over everyone, like a suffocating blanket. This wasn't just about one horrible flight. This was about systemic failure. About an airline that had chosen profits over the safety and dignity of its black passengers. Naomi, still bleeding, still in shock, managed to speak. Her voice was weak, but clear. "I'm not the only one." Every head turned toward her. She looked up at Captain Ramirez with eyes that had aged years in the past 2 hours. "People like him think they can break us, that they can make us disappear, make us small, make us nothing." She turned to look at Bradford, blood still dripping from her chin. "But you didn't win. You lost." The plane touched down on the runway, the wheels screeching against concrete. Through the windows, emergency vehicles could be seen racing alongside the plane. Police cars, ambulances, fire trucks, the full response. The aircraft slowed, turned off the runway, and taxied toward a remote stand where a cluster of official vehicles waited. The nightmare flight was almost over. But for everyone involved, the real reckoning was just beginning. The plane came to a complete stop. The seatbelt sign dinged off, but Captain Ramirez's voice came over the intercom immediately. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats. Law enforcement will be boarding shortly. Thank you for your patience." The cabin was thick with tension. Nobody wanted to move. Nobody wanted to break the spell of what they had just witnessed. Passengers who had been uninvolved sat in stunned silence, processing the violence they had seen. The forward door opened with a hiss, and a team of police officers in navy blue uniforms entered the aircraft. Leading them was Detective Rita Williams, a 40-year-old black woman with close-cropped hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Behind her came Officer Marshall Banks, a 35-year-old white man with a military bearing. They were followed by 2 EMTs in bright red jackets carrying medical bags. Rita's eyes swept the cabin, taking in the scene with practiced efficiency until they landed on Naomi. Her professional mask cracked for just a moment, a flash of anger and sorrow crossing her face. She moved directly to Naomi's seat and knelt beside her. "Hi, honey. My name is Detective Williams. We're here to help you now." Naomi looked at Rita with eyes that had seen too much. "Am I in trouble?" she whispered. Rita's heart broke. "No, baby. No. You're not in trouble. You did nothing wrong." The EMTs took over from Felicia, gently examining Naomi's injuries. "We need to transport her to the hospital," one of them said. "Possible nasal fracture, lacerations, signs of shock. We need to go now." Rita stood and turned to where Bradford was still restrained. Marshall was already pulling out his handcuffs. "Bradford Whitmore," Rita said, her voice hard as iron. "You're under arrest for assault and battery, assault on an aircraft, racial intimidation, and violation of federal aviation safety regulations." Bradford's face contorted with rage. "This is outrageous. I'm the victim here. I was defending myself." Marshall stepped forward and began the process of switching Bradford from the flex cuffs to metal handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." While Marshall was reading Bradford his rights, another officer was examining Bradford's phone that Sterling had secured. Officer Torres, a young Hispanic man with sharp technical skills, was scrolling through the messages and photos. His face grew darker with each swipe. "Detective Williams," he called out. "You need to see this." Rita stepped over, and Torres showed her the screen. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God!" Captain Ramirez, who was standing nearby, asked, "What is it?" Rita held up the phone so everyone nearby could see. "He has an entire folder, labeled Entitled Passengers. It's full of photographs, dozens of them, maybe hundreds." She scrolled through the images, photo after photo of black passengers, on planes, in airports, at gates, each one tagged with offensive, racist captions. "These people don't belong here. Ruining air travel for everyone. Why can't they afford their own jets?" The captions went on and on, each one more vile than the last. Torres pulled up Bradford's text message history. Has been doing this for years, detective. Different flights, different airlines. Same pattern. He targets black passengers, harasses them, sometimes escalates to physical confrontation. Then he plays victim when challenged. Felicia, hearing this, pressed a hand to her mouth. I knew it. I knew he was a repeat offender. Rita turned to her. You filed a report before. Felicia nodded. 6 months ago. A young woman named Tamara Green. Same thing. He harassed her the entire flight, made racist comments. When she stood up to him, he threw coffee on her. Claimed it was an accident. Rita's jaw clenched. What happened with that complaint? Felicia's voice was bitter. The airline buried it. Corporate said they had no conclusive evidence, and he was too valuable a customer to lose. Rita pulled out her phone and made a call. This is Detective Williams. I need you to run a nationwide search. Name Bradford Whitmore, age 45. I'm looking for any complaints, incidents, police reports involving racial harassment or assault. Check FAA databases, airline incident reports, everything. She paused, listening. Yes, it's urgent. I think we have a serial offender. While they waited, more passengers began coming forward. The young man Jared spoke up again. Officer, I want to make a statement too. He assaulted me in the boarding area. I didn't report it because I had to catch my flight, but I want it on record now. Brooke raised her hand. Me too. I want to file a complaint about what he said to me. One by one, passengers who had witnessed Bradford's behavior throughout the flight stepped forward to give statements. Rita's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her face grew grave. How many? A pause. 12? Are you sure? Another pause. Okay, start contacting them. We need victim statements. She hung up and turned to her partner Marshall. 12 separate incidents over the past 3 years. Different cities, different airlines, all involving black passengers. Most filed complaints that went nowhere. The cabin erupted in shocked murmurs. 12 victims. 12 times Bradford had gotten away with this. As the EMTs prepared to move Naomi onto a stretcher, Bradford was being escorted off the plane. As he passed by Naomi's row, he stopped and leaned toward her, his voice a hiss. This isn't over, girl. My lawyers will destroy you. You and everyone who lied for you. Before Rita could intervene, Naomi did something that shocked everyone. She sat up straighter, looked Bradford directly in the eyes, and spoke clearly despite her split lip and swollen face. Yes, it is. It's over. For you. Bradford tried to lunge toward her, but Marshall jerked him back hard. Keep moving, Marshall ordered, his voice brooking no argument. As Bradford was led away, still shouting threats, Naomi slumped back against the seat. Felicia wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You were so brave, honey. So incredibly brave. Naomi shook her head weakly. I was just tired of being scared. Captain Ramirez knelt beside her before the EMTs took her away. Naomi, I want you to know something. What happened to you today should never have happened. And going to make sure it never happens again. Not on my flights. Not on any flights. Naomi looked at him with eyes full of pain and exhaustion. Thank you for believing me, Captain. Not everyone does. Hector felt tears prick at his own eyes. I believe you. And Im's sorry. Im's so sorry this happened. As the EMTs carried Naomi off the plane on a stretcher, the remaining passengers began to file out slowly, quietly. Many were crying. Some stopped to speak to the police, offering to give statements. Kelsey made sure her video was sent to the authorities, to the airline, and to several news outlets. The story was going to break fast, and she wanted to make sure the truth got out before Bradford's lawyers could spin it. Darren, Miguel, and several other passengers, who had tried to help Naomi, were asked to stay, to give detailed statements. As they sat in the terminal, waiting to be interviewed, Miguel turned to Darren. "I keep thinking, what if we hadn't said anything? What if we had just stayed quiet, like everyone wanted us to?" Darren shook his head. Then he would have gotten away with it. Again. Like he's gotten away with it 12 times before. The weight of that reality settled over them. 12 times. 12 victims who had been ignored, dismissed, told their complaints didn't matter. In the ambulance rushing toward the hospital, Naomi lay on the gurney, an oxygen mask over her face, an EMT holding her hand. She thought about her mama, who would be landing in Indianapolis soon after getting an emergency call from the airline. She thought about her little brother and sister, who would hear about this and be scared. She thought about Northwestern, and whether they would still want her after this, after she had been beaten and bloodied and made a spectacle of. But most of all, she thought about Tamara Green and the 11 other women whose names she didn't know yet, the ones who had suffered alone, the ones who had been told their pain didn't matter. She wasn't going to let that happen anymore. Not if she could help it. Back at the airport, Detective Rita Williams stood in the terminal, watching Bradford being loaded into a police car, still shouting about his rights. She pulled out her phone and dialed the number that had been forwarded to her. A woman answered. "Hello." Rita took a breath. "Is this Tamara Green?" A pause. "Yes. Who is this?" Rita's voice was gentle but firm. "Miss Green, my name is Detective Rita Williams, with the Indianapolis Police Department. I'm calling about an incident you reported 6 months ago on a Delta flight. I need you to know that we believe you, and we're going to make sure justice is done." Finally, on the other end of the line, Tamara Green began to cry. "Someone finally believes me." Rita's voice cracked slightly. "Yes, Mom. And there are 11 other women just like you. We're going to find them all. And they're all going to get their day in court." As Rita hung up the phone, she looked out at the tarmac where the plane still sat, emergency lights flashing around it. This was bigger than one incident. One flight, one victim. This was about a system that had failed over and over again. But today, finally, the system was going to answer for it. The tables had turned, and there was no going back. The terminal had been cleared of regular passengers, leaving only those involved in the incident and the law enforcement personnel processing the scene. Naomi had been rushed to Indianapolis Community Hospital, and Captain Ramirez had made sure Felicia accompanied her so she wouldn't be alone until her mother arrived. The remaining passengers from row 12 and the surrounding area sat in a cordoned-off section of the gate, waiting to give their statements. That's when Kelsey Morris noticed something that made her blood run cold. She had been reviewing the video on her phone, making sure everything had uploaded correctly, when she noticed Geneva Pritchard in the background of several shots. But Geneva wasn't just watching the assault. She was filming it. On her own phone. Deliberately. Kelsey's hands started shaking as she realized what she was seeing. She stood up and walked over to where Detective Williams was coordinating with airport security. "Detective, I need to show you something. Right now." Rita looked at the young woman's pale face and followed her to a quiet corner. Kelsey pulled up her video and pointed at the screen. "Look at this. In the background. That older white woman, Geneva. She's filming Naomi getting beaten. She's not trying to help. She's not calling for help. She's filming." Rita's eyes narrowed as she watched. Geneva's phone was clearly visible, pointed directly at Naomi, even as Bradford's fists connected with the girl's face. Rita's jaw clenched. "Where is she now?" Kelsey pointed across the terminal to where Geneva sat, looking nervous and impatient. Rita walked over with deliberate steps. Officer Marshall behind her. "Mom, can I see your phone, please?" Geneva looked up, startled. "My phone? Why?" Rita's voice was polite but firm. It's part of our investigation. I need to see your phone. Geneva clutched her purse closer. I don't think so. That's my private property. Marshall stepped forward. Mom, we can obtain a warrant, but that will take time and will require us to hold you here. Or you can cooperate voluntarily. Geneva's face flushed with indignation, but she pulled out her phone and handed it over with a huff. This is ridiculous. I haven't done anything wrong. Rita took the phone and started scrolling. Her expression darkened with each swipe. You've been filming since boarding. Geneva shifted uncomfortably. I was just documenting my travel experience. Rita found the video files. Multiple videos of Naomi. Naomi sitting in her seat, reading. Naomi trying to deal with Bradford's harassment. Naomi being assaulted. And worse. Geneva had posted them. Rita's voice was ice cold as she read the caption aloud. Ghetto girl causes trouble on my flight. This is what happens when you let them in first class. She looked up at Geneva. Except you weren't in first class. You were in economy. Row 12. Right next to this child who was being beaten. Geneva's face went pale. I have freedom of speech. I can post what I want. Rita handed the phone to Officer Torres. This video has how many views? Torres checked. 15,000 views. And the comments are, they're bad, detective. Really bad. Rita turned back to Geneva. You posted video of a minor being assaulted, without her consent, or her parents' consent, for internet attention. You exploited a child's trauma. Geneva stood up, her voice shrill. I didn't touch her. I didn't do anything to her. Kelsey, who had been listening, couldn't stay quiet. No, but you filmed her getting beaten for likes. That's sick. Miguel, sitting nearby, shook his head in disgust. You're as bad as he is, maybe worse. At least he was upfront about his hate. You hid behind your phone. Darren stood up, his voice shaking with controlled anger. A child was bleeding right in front of you, and your first thought was to film it and make it go viral. What kind of person does that? Geneva looked around at the faces surrounding her, all filled with disgust and anger. I was documenting evidence, she protested. That's all. I was helping. Rita pulled out her handcuffs. Ma'am, turn around. Geneva's eyes widened. What? You can't arrest me. Rita's voice was granite hard. Geneva Pritchard, you're being charged with exploitation of a minor, distribution of violent imagery involving a minor without consent, and obstruction of justice for failing to render aid during an assault. Geneva began to cry, but there was no sympathy in any of the faces around her. This is outrageous. I have rights. Marshall, working with Rita to cuff Geneva, spoke quietly. So did that 17-year-old girl. But you didn't care about her rights when you were turning her trauma into content. As Geneva was led away, still protesting, Kelsey sat down heavily in one of the gate chairs. Her hands were shaking. I can't believe this. How many people saw that video and didn't report it? How many people liked it or shared it? Torres, examining Geneva's phone more closely, had a grim answer. The comments are overwhelmingly supportive of what Bradford did. They're calling Naomi racial slurs. They're saying she deserved it. He looked up, his young face aged by what he was reading. This video has been shared over 1,000 times in the past hour. Rita felt a wave of nausea. The assault had happened less than 2 hours ago, and already it was spreading across the internet like a virus. But then Torres found something else. Detective, there's more. Geneva has been in contact with Bradford. Look at these messages. He showed her the screen. Text messages between Geneva and Bradford, sent before the assault. She's sitting next to me, Bradford had written. And she's exactly the type you warned me about. Geneva had responded. Get it on video if anything happens. We need documentation. The terminal went silent. as the full horror of what Torres had found sank in. This wasn't just harassment. This wasn't just a man losing his temper. Bradford and Geneva had been in communication. They had planned something. Rita's mind raced. They know each other. Torres scrolled further back. They're in a group chat together. Something called Real Americans United. There are 37 people in this chat. He opened the group conversation, and everyone nearby who could see the screen gasped. The group chat was a cesspool of racist ideology, conspiracy theories about immigration and diversity, and discussions about confronting minorities in public spaces. Multiple members had posted stories about harassing black people on planes, in restaurants, in stores. They called it defending their rights and standing up for real America. And Bradford was one of the most active members. But Geneva wasn't just a member. She was an administrator. Rita looked at Officer Marshall, her face pale. This is organized. This is a network. Marshall nodded grimly. We need to get federal authorities involved. FBI. This could be domestic terrorism. Rita made another call. This one to the FBI field office in Indianapolis. As she explained what they had found, more officers arrived to secure Geneva's phone as evidence and to begin tracking down other members of the group chat. Kelsey, listening to all of this, felt her heart pounding. Detective, I need to update my video. People need to know this wasn't just one racist guy having a bad day. This was planned. Rita nodded. Just make sure you report facts. We don't want to compromise the investigation. Kelsey immediately opened her social media apps and began typing. Within minutes, her update was live, explaining the group chat, the coordinated harassment, the evidence of conspiracy. The story exploded. Within an hour, it was trending on every platform. Major news networks picked it up. Civil rights organizations issued statements. Northwestern University, Naomi's future school, released a statement condemning the attack and pledging full support for Naomi, including counseling services, increased security, and a guarantee that her scholarship would not be affected. The airline's corporate office was flooded with calls. The hashtag, Justice for Naomi, was everywhere. But for Naomi herself, none of that mattered yet. She was in a hospital room, her face swollen and bandaged, her nose set and splinted, waiting for her mama to arrive. The doctor had told her she was lucky. The nose would heal. The cuts would fade. But the psychological impact, that would take longer. A nurse sat with her, holding her hand, as Naomi drifted in and out of a medicated haze. In her semi-conscious state, she kept replaying the attack. Bradford's fist. The pain. The blood. The fear. Then the hospital room door burst open and Pearl Walker rushed in, her face streaked with tears, still wearing her nurse's scrubs from the hospital where she worked. "Baby! Oh, my baby!" She ran to Naomi's bedside and carefully, so carefully, wrapped her arms around her daughter. Naomi, who had been holding it together for the police, for the EMTs, for everyone, finally broke down completely. She sobbed into her mama's shoulder like she was 5 years old again, all the pain and terror pouring out of her. "Mama, he hurt me so bad," Naomi cried. "He said I didn't belong. He said I was nothing." Pearl held her tighter, her own tears falling into Naomi's hair. "He lied, baby. He lied about all of it. You are everything. You are brilliant, and strong, and brave. And he's going to pay for what he did to you. I promise you that." Outside the hospital room, Detective Rita Williams stood with Captain Hector Ramirez. They watched through the window as mother and daughter clung to each other. "That could have been my daughter," Hector said quietly. "I have 3 girls. Any one of them could have been sitting in that seat." Rita nodded. "It could have been any of our kids. That's what makes this so terrifying." Bradford and Geneva, and the other 35 people in that group chat. They're out there every day, flying on planes, working in offices, teaching in schools, and they believe they have the right to decide who belongs and who doesn't. Hector turned to her. What happens now? Rita's jaws set with determination. Now? Now we make sure every single member of that group is investigated. We find every victim. We build a case so strong that no lawyer, no amount of money, no platinum status can save them. And we make sure Naomi knows that she didn't just survive. She won. She exposed something rotten that's been hidden for too long. And because of her courage, it's going to be dragged into the light. 3 months passed. The world watched as the case against Bradford Whitmore unfolded. The FBI's investigation into the Real Americans United group led to federal charges against 17 members for conspiracy to commit hate crimes. Bradford himself faced 12 counts of assault, harassment, and violation of federal aviation safety regulations from incidents spanning 3 years. Geneva Pritchard was charged with exploitation of a minor and conspiracy. Both faced significant prison time. The trial was held in federal court in Atlanta, moved from Indianapolis to accommodate the large number of victims who lived in Georgia. Naomi had recovered physically. Her nose had healed, leaving only a slight bump that the plastic surgeon said could be corrected if she wanted. The cuts on her lip had faded to thin white lines, but the emotional scars ran deeper. She had nightmares about the attack. Panic attacks in crowded spaces. A therapist she saw twice a week helped her process the trauma, teaching her coping mechanisms and helping her understand that what happened wasn't her fault. But Naomi refused to hide. When the prosecutor asked if she would testify, she said yes without hesitation. Her mama tried to talk her out of it, worried about re-traumatizing her baby girl. But Naomi was firm. Mama, if I don't stand up now, he wins. All those other women, they tried to speak up and nobody listened. I have to do this. For them. So on a cold morning in November, Naomi walked into that courtroom wearing a navy blue suit her mama had bought special for the occasion. Her hair was pulled back neatly. Her head was high. The courtroom was packed. Media filled the back rows. Civil rights advocates sat in solidarity. And in the front row, right behind the prosecutor's table, sat 11 other women. The victims Bradford had harassed before Naomi. They had all come forward after Detective Williams tracked them down. Tamara Green, the woman from 6 months earlier, sat in the middle, her hand clasped with the woman next to her. When Naomi entered, all 11 stood up. It was spontaneous, unrehearsed. They stood as one, honoring her courage. Naomi took the witness stand. The prosecutor, a black woman named Simone Crawford, approached gently. Naomi, can you tell the court what happened on August 15th aboard Delta Flight 2847? Naomi took a deep breath and began. She told them everything. The harassment from the moment Bradford sat down, the escalating comments, the invasion of her belongings, the assault. Her voice shook sometimes, and she had to pause to compose herself. But she got through it. Every horrible detail. When Bradford's defense attorney tried to cross-examine her, suggesting she had provoked his client, Naomi looked the lawyer dead in the eye and said, I was 17 years old, sitting in my assigned seat, reading a textbook. I was going to college on a scholarship I earned. What exactly did I do to provoke him? Exist while black. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, but Naomi's words echoed through the room and later across every news channel in America. One by one, the other victims testified. The pattern was undeniable. Bradford targeted black women, usually young, usually traveling alone. He harassed them, escalated conflicts, and when they stood up for themselves, he became violent. The defense tried to argue each incident separately, but the prosecution painted a clear picture of a serial predator. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge, an older black man named Leonard Hayes, looked down at Bradford with an expression of profound disappointment. "Mr. Whitmore, you are a man of means and education. You had every advantage in life, and you used those advantages to terrorize women whose only crime was sharing space with you. You have shown no remorse. You have blamed everyone but yourself. This court sentences you to 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years supervised release, and a lifetime ban from commercial aviation." Bradford's face turned purple as he was led away. Geneva received 3 years and a $50,000 fine. But the victory wasn't just legal. In the months following the incident, real change began to happen. The airline industry, facing massive public pressure and multiple lawsuits, implemented new policies: mandatory anti-racism training for all employees, a zero-tolerance policy for passenger harassment, an independent review board to handle discrimination complaints, security cameras with audio in all cabins, with footage automatically forwarded to authorities when incidents occurred. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Felicia Martin, the flight attendant who had stood by Naomi, was promoted to supervisor of passenger safety. One of her first initiatives was creating a support network for crew members dealing with harassment and discrimination, ensuring they would never again have to choose between protecting passengers and protecting their jobs. Captain Hector Ramirez began speaking at aviation conferences about racial justice and the responsibility of those in authority to use their power to protect the vulnerable. Northwestern University didn't just stand by Naomi, they celebrated her. When she arrived on campus in September, a month late because of the trial, she was greeted by the university president and a crowd of students holding signs that said, "Welcome home, Naomi, and your courage inspires us." The university created a full scholarship in her name for future students who had overcome adversity. They offered her free counseling, academic tutoring if she fell behind, and a safety escort service so she would never have to walk alone if she didn't want to. 1 year after the assault, Naomi stood at a podium in a conference center in Chicago. She had been invited to speak at a national civil rights conference about aviation safety and racial justice. She wore a professional suit. Her hair was natural, a crown of coils she had finally learned to love. The scar on her lip was visible, but she didn't try to hide it. That scar was part of her story. As she looked out at the audience of hundreds, she saw familiar faces: Felicia, Darren, Miguel, Kelsey, Captain Ramirez, Detective Williams, the 11 other victims, her mama and siblings in the front row. Naomi took a breath and began. 1 year ago, I was beaten on an airplane because of the color of my skin. A man decided, based on nothing more than how I looked, that I didn't belong, that I was less than human, that I deserved to be hurt. She paused, letting those words sink in. I could have let that moment define me. I could have let it destroy my dreams, my hope, my belief in humanity. But I made a different choice. I chose to rise, not just for me, but for Tamara Green, for Simone, Crystal, Whitney, Jasmine, Keisha, Latoya, Shanice, Brianna, Aaliyah, and Destiny. She gestured to the women sitting together in the third row, the women who came before me, the women who tried to speak and weren't heard. Naomi continued, her voice growing stronger. We belong everywhere. In classrooms and boardrooms and cockpits and cabins 30,000 feet in the sky. We belong in laboratories and courtrooms and operating rooms and anywhere else we have the skills and the drive to be. Nobody gets to tell us otherwise. The audience rose to their feet, applause thundering through the room. But Naomi wasn't done. To everyone watching this, especially young black girls who are scared of taking up space, I want you to know something. You are not too much. You are not too loud. You are not too ambitious. You are exactly enough. And when someone tries to make you small, you stand tall. You speak up. You fight back. Not with fists, but with your voice, your truth, your refusal to be erased. After the speech, as people lined up to thank her and take photos, a young black girl, maybe 12 years old, approached shyly. "Miss Naomi, can I ask you something?" Naomi knelt down to her level. "Of course, sweetheart. What's your name?" The girl whispered, "I'm Destiny. Like the woman you mentioned. I want to be a pilot someday. But I'm scared people won't want me to." Naomi took both of Destiny's hands in hers. "Listen to me. You can be anything you want to be. And yes, some people won't like it. Some people will try to stop you. But for every Bradford, there are 10 Felicias and Captain Ramirez and Detective Williams. People who will believe in you and protect you and lift you up. And someday, you're going to fly a plane full of passengers, and you're going to show them what strength and grace look like." 2 years after the assault, Naomi was a sophomore at Northwestern, top of her biomedical engineering class. She volunteered at Cook County Hospital, shadowing doctors in the emergency room. She had started a campus organization called Students Against Aviation Racism that worked with airlines to improve policies. And she had been invited to join the FAA's advisory board on passenger safety. Bradford was in federal prison, where he would stay for 3 more years. Geneva had served her time and been released, but her life had changed dramatically. She had lost friends, family members who wanted nothing to do with her, and any sense of anonymity. The Real Americans United group had been completely dismantled. Several members faced charges. Others lost jobs when their participation was exposed. The FBI continued to monitor similar groups, using the case as a blueprint for identifying and disrupting organized racist activity. But beyond the legal victories, beyond the policy changes, beyond even the personal triumph of Naomi thriving at Northwestern, something else had shifted. Conversations were happening. People who had stayed silent during racist incidents before were speaking up. Flight attendants and pilots felt empowered to intervene. Passengers felt empowered to film and report. On the 3rd anniversary of the attack, Naomi boarded a plane, Delta Flight 1173 from Chicago to Los Angeles. She was heading to a medical conference, where she would present research she had been working on about cellular regeneration and wound healing. As she found her seat, this time in first class courtesy of an airline upgrade program for passengers who had experienced trauma on flights, she took a deep breath. Flying was still hard sometimes. The anxiety still crept in. But she refused to let fear win. The flight attendant working first class approached her with a warm smile. "Miss Walker? I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Brianna. I went through the new training program that was created after your case. I want you to know that we see you, we value you, and you're safe on this flight." Naomi felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears this time. "Thank you," she said. "That means everything." The flight was smooth, uneventful, perfect. As the plane descended into Los Angeles, Naomi looked out the window at the sprawling city below, the Pacific Ocean glittering in the distance, and thought about how far she had come. She thought about the scared 17-year-old girl on that plane 3 years ago, covered in blood, believing her life was over. She thought about the girl she was now, pre-med student, activist, survivor, thriver. She thought about all the Naomis out there, young black girls who needed to know that they could survive the storms and come out stronger. She thought about her mama, who had worked 3 jobs and raised 3 kids alone, and never once told them they couldn't reach for the stars. And she thought about the day, maybe 10 years from now, when she would put on a white coat with Dr. Naomi Walker embroidered on it and walk into a hospital to save lives. The plane landed smoothly, As Naomi gathered her things, the passenger next to her, a middle-aged white man she hadn't spoken to during the flight, turned to her. "First time flying to LA?" he asked politely. Naomi smiled, remembering that question from so long ago. "No," she said. "But every flight is a new beginning." Now I want to hear from all of you who watched this story. Comment below and tell me, have you ever witnessed injustice and spoken up? Or have you stayed silent and regretted it? What would you have done if you were on that plane? And most importantly, how can we all work together to make sure no one ever has to go through what Naomi did? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Hit that like button if this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you want to be braver. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories about courage, justice, and the power of standing up for what's right. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Naomi's message today. Someone who's fighting their own battles. Someone who needs to know that they're not alone. Thank you for watching Naomi's story. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of the change we need in this world. Remember, we all have the power to stand up, speak out, and make a difference. Use that power. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight, keep believing in justice, and keep remembering that every single one of us belongs everywhere we have the courage to go. Take care of yourselves and each other. Naomi's story teaches us profound truths about courage, justice, and the power of solidarity in the face of hatred. First, silence is complicity. Every passenger who witnessed Bradford's harassment and did nothing allowed it to escalate. When we see injustice, we must speak up immediately, even when it's uncomfortable. Second, systemic change requires persistent pressure. Bradford had harassed passengers for years because institutions protected profit over people. Only when victims united and demanded accountability did real change occur. Third, documentation matters. Kelsey's video and the cabin cameras provided irrefutable evidence that couldn't be dismissed or denied. In today's world, recording injustice can be a powerful tool for truth. Fourth, trauma doesn't define us. Naomi could have let that horrific experience destroy her dreams, but instead, she transformed her pain into purpose, becoming an advocate for others. Fifth, solidarity amplifies impact. The 11 other victims standing together in that courtroom showed that isolated incidents were actually a pattern of predatory behavior. Finally, privilege carries responsibility. Captain Ramirez, Detective Williams, and others in positions of authority used their power to protect the vulnerable rather than the powerful. We must all examine how we can use whatever privilege we hold to create a more just world where everyone truly belongs. Everywhere. Now I need to hear from you. Have you ever experienced discrimination or witnessed someone being targeted because of their race? How did you respond? What would you do differently today after hearing Naomi's story? Comment below and share your experiences. If you believe that everyone deserves to travel safely, to pursue their dreams without fear, and to be treated with dignity regardless of their skin color, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories about real people fighting real injustice and winning. Share this video with your family, your friends, your coworkers, anyone who needs to understand that racism isn't just history. It's happening right now. On planes, in schools, in workplaces everywhere. But share it also, because it's a story of hope, of a 17-year-old girl who refused to be broken and changed an entire industry. Thank you for watching, for caring, for being part of the solution. May you always have the courage to stand up when it matters most, the wisdom to know when silence is violence, and the strength to fight for a world where everyone truly belongs. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and remember that your voice matters. Until next time, keep standing up for what's right.